The distress beacon was dying. It came through as a weak, broken pulse, buried in static, the kind of signal most ships never noticed, and most captains ignored even if they de-dolled hardware failing power no rescue codino. Priority tag a ghost call in deep space but. Caleb Rohr had learned a long time ago that ghost calls usually meant real people beacon source identified. Iris said from the bridge, her voice flat as ever Covenant scout. Frigate Ed rifting? Without propulsion reactor? Offline for approximately 72 hours, CALB. Leaned forward in the pilot chair and studied. The wreck on the main screen frigate. Looked torn open own. Side of the hull was ripped apart. Darkened by blast damage, emergency lights flickered behind cracked viewports. Then faded again. It was the kind of ship everyone wrote off and flew past. Active weapons. Caleb Ascanono. Engines. No targeting lock. No external response. Iris Sadie detect 2 weak life signs in the aft survival. Compartment contracrished. Heat is unstablocks. Reserves are low. CLOB's jaw tighten at 2. People sealed in a freezing compartment while command somewhere decided they were no longer worth the fuel. Knew that. Calculation 2 well years ago on Kepler for 42B. He had been the one left behind. Kallman called his extraction tactically unfeasibly. He said they would circle back. He did note a smuggler named Jang pulled him out instead. Burning half his reactor to do it and losing an arm in the procession, Caleb asked him why. Jang just shrugged and said, because I could see a Lebby stew'd bring us in close prep. The boarding tube Wake Medical RIS gave an electronic. Psychovenant ships are known to carry trap charges and delayed scuttle system snow too. Say that every time you ignore MEB, cause every time. You are still helpful ironbound, rotated and eased toward the dead. Frigate on maneuvering thrusters B, the time Caleb reached the airlock. The ship had matched drift, sealed himself into his boarding suit. Mag boots locking with a heavy clack helmet, downhod live pulse, steady and tube anchored. IRIS said pressure seal as holding barrel-like step through. Cut the Covenant hole with a plasma torch. And entered the Rexalensino, Ingenesno Vensno living ship. Sounds just frozen metal and the faint hiss of escaping air and distant sectionless helmet lights swept over scorched walls. Dangling cables and drifting bodies and Covenant armorators, or a shipboard fight, had done more than kill the crew, had gutted the entire frigate out me. Caleb's side-a-line appeared on his visoport maintenance corridor, thin ladder shaft, 2 aft compartment. Direct corridor is collapsed, moved fast. Pulling himself through half-frozen passages, boots striking deck plates whenever gravity flickered back online and short bursts ship groaned around him. A long metallic complaint life signs are weaker. Iris warned estimate under 20-minute Esthin guide, meet the final bulkhead. The manual controls were dead. CLOB. Cupped the seam with his torch and forced the door open with both hands. Cold air rolled out and a white cloud compartment was dim. Lit only by red emergency strips and a broken thermal unit hissing in the corner. 3 figures were huddled against the far. Walsey Liv stopped for half a heartbeat. Beacon had only read 2 because the third was 2. Small to register. Clea Felixian pilot sat slumped against a locker. Gray and white fur matted with frost and blood, her flight suit torn at the shoulder and her arms. Wrapped in thermal foil was a Cubtini shaking. Barely Conschausbeiseiter lay a Lupari tracker in tactical gear, broad and heavy. One side of his torso, dark with dried blood, was awake enough to glare, but not enough to stand. CALB, crossed the room, and dropped to one knee. He said. Voice low through the helmet speakery, am getting you out. Felixian's bright green eyes opened. A little widerish flinched at the sight of a Humano Covenant. She whispered, am not Covenant. Tried to focus. Homanyahat, is your mnemonics? Her claws tightened around the cub, please. Cub first. See, Alub looked at the cub, then back at her, and something hard twisted in his chest. Evan now. She was thinking of the cub before. Her selfie scanned all 3 with his wrist med. Unithipothermian triatiate. Traumath Lupari was bleeding slowly inside his abdomen. Cub's temperature was dangerously low. IRS, Caleb said. I need a cargo hauler drone in here now. Medical priority for 3 patients. RIS. Posit 3 confirmedrin, inbound. CALB, touched the Luparis shoulder trackern. You hear Megaldan eyes opened to Slitzva, UGHN. The wolf raspid compart sealed cowled. Not move them you. Kept them alive thought is enough via UGHN gave a week. Tired growl Covenant command said we were. Compromise marked us non-recoverable X's. Voice trembled with exhaustion axable loss. CLOB had heard those exact words in human uniforms, hated them in every language. The hatch behind him clanged death. Spherical hauler drone rolled in. Optics glowing blue skier, the Lupari. CALEB ordered mechanical arms extended and strapped VAUGHN into a support cradle. CALB peeled back part of the foil blanket and checked the cub's small chest. Fast breaths, eyes barely open olive. But fading the cub made a faint sound and pressed closer to Nex. Wex grabbed CALEB's forearm dough, not separate. Uzi will know tucked the cub into the thermal fold of his own suit. Lifted Nix carefully into his arms, and nodded at the drone moved return trip was a blur of frozen corridors, and warning tonist wreck shifted once. Hard enough to send sparks from a ceiling panel structural failure risk increasing. Iris said you need to exit immediately. Its CLAB moved through the cut hatch, crossed the boarding tube, and reached the iron bounds. Inner lock with Nix against his chest, and the cub held tight under his suit heating layerth drone. Followed with VAU, GHN, secured in clamps, hatch sealed behind them. CALB Ranth medical bay doors opened before he got there. White light spilled across the dictruma. Tables unfolded automatically, and a pediatric warming pod extended from the waltable one. Felixian adult, Iris said, now appearing as a blue hologram between the monitors to bowl 2. Lupari adult pediatric pod ready. CLLB laid Nix on the nearest tables, tried to sit up, panic flashing in her iced cub. She gasped. Right her eye app placed the cub into the warming pod beside her line of sight. Lee then, did she release her grip on his sleeve. Bay turned into controlled motion warm. IV lines oxygen, mask stabilized SIRSP, nanite spelled arms, moved in precise arcs, while Iris read off numbers. Felixian, severe hypothermia, dehydration, 3 fractured ribs, partial lung collapse to bleeding, internal bleeding, blood loss, infection, onset surgery protocol, activa cub, critical cold stress, malnutrition, no major skeletal trauma arming and glucose support and progressi. LEB stood by the pod and watched the cub's heartbeat rise one line at a time. How close were they? He asked quietly. IR eyes checked the monitor without intervention. The cub had less than 4 hours to adults. Perhaps 6 ALB exhaled, slowly, and YX woke. First their eyes snapped open and she tried to rise. But Caleb pressed a hand gently to her shoulder. Izu. Arsafesh ignored him and looked at the pod when she saw the cub breathing steadily in warm amber light. Her body shook once with relief. You've kept your word. She whispered. He said I would. Turned back to him. Suspicion and gratitude crossed on her face. Would a human risk the Seif Covenant command tracks our tags? They may come for us. CILB pulled a chair between her table and Vonson. They can come with that is not an answer. Leaned back. Studying an old scar across his nucleus, was left behind on human command, did the math and decided I was not worth the ship. The fuel, or the risk. A smuggler ignored the order and saved me anyway. And YX was silent. CLB. That nodded toward the QB. Keep hearing that same math all over the galaxy. Crew. Value mission cost acceptable loss. Aston. I find a pilot. A tracker. And a cub freezing in a dead compartment because someone in uniform wanted a cleaner. Report meter. Icy do not believe in that kind of mathin. Wykes' ears lower reth. Stories say humans are reckless of us already. Also say humans do not abandon cubs. CLLB gave a tired half. Smile some humans. Dobot not on my ship in the next table. Vaughn groaned awake and reached for a weapon that was not Theralax. Kaliba, Sadu are patched up. Not captured via Juge. Octa looked from Khalib to Nex to the cub. Then finally settled back. Human captain, he muttered. Voice refuer either brave or broken Beth. Iris answered from across the bay VAUGH and gave a short laugh, then winced hours later. The crisis had passed, the medical lights softeneth monitors still chirped. But less urgently salute. Lowered the warming pod wall when the cub woke, and chirped weakly for Nyx gathered. The small body against her chest enclosed, her eyes as if she had been holding her breath for day sway. We're ordered to hold aft, after impact, Nyx said after a while. Her voice was stronger now. But tired raiders breached deck to command. Ordered mobile personnel to withdraw. Vyujichan stayed because I could not move, and the cub stroked one tiny earth cub as my sister's. Died in the first breach. Bhon stared at the Chilengi sent 7 distress request command. Answered Wenthy flagged us contaminated and listed the compartment as lost. Prototype Perpertle turned away long enough to hide the anger on his face, same cruel to referent flag when he looked back. Nyx was watching him care. Fully if we leave at the next port, she asked. Covenant patrols will scan USTI. We'll take the cub thie may execute VAUGHN for disobeying extraction protocol. Caleb already knew she was right. He also knew. Had made his choice the moment he cut into that wreck. The Ironbound runs salvage and escort contracts. He said, I can use a recon pilot and a tracker. Nyx blinked. You are offering us crew positions. I am offering you bunks. Pay. And one standing rule, he looked at the cub. No one on my ship gets left behind. VAUGHN's ears lifted, NYX's eyes filled. But she kept her voice steady. Covenant may come for us. Probably they will call us assets. Caleb shrugged. They can call you whatever they want. I call you crew. Iris folded her holographic hands for planning purposes. Captain. Armed retrieval teams remain more likely than legal complaints. Caleb grinned. See expensive Nyx. Let out a shaky laugh that turned into a quiet sob. She shifted the cub carefully and extended her hand. Palm open in the human gesture. Then we accept all 3 of us. Caleb took her hand gently. Welcome aboard. Lieutenant Nyx. He looked at VAUGHN tracker Vaughn. Vaughn gave a weak field salute. I will earn my berth. Get healed first. Caleb said then, earn whatever you want, as he turned toward the door. Iris moved beside him in blue light. You realize? She said that you have just complicated our operations. By bringing in 2 rescued crew members and 1 cub, while challenging a military power. Caleb glanced back into the bay. Nyx was half asleep with the cub tucked under her chin. Vaughn had finally relaxed. The medbay no longer looked like a trauma room. It looked like the beginning of something. The cub stirred, lifted its head, and made a tiny sound toward Caleb as if recognizing his voice. Caleb smiled at one more ration line. He said, in a small harness you are assuming the cub stays in a galaxy that leaves people in the dark. Calby said, stepping into the corridor, anyone I pull out gets a choice behind him. The Ironbound's engines warmed for departure this time. No one was being left behind for more emotional HFY stories and powerful rescues. Subscribe to Neon Cub Tales, like, share, and drop a comment if you want part 2.